In September 2000, Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph flew to Dallas. Netflix was in serious trouble. The dot-com crash had compressed the company's funding options. The DVD by mail model was working. Customers who tried it liked it. But the company was losing money and burning cash at a rate that made its survival genuinely uncertain. Hastings and Randolph had spent months trying to arrange a meeting at Blockbuster's headquarters. The meeting had finally been scheduled, and it was the next morning. The evening before the meeting, Randolph, Hastings, and Netflix's CFO Barry McCarthy were at Netflix's first-ever corporate retreat in rural California, when word came that Blockbuster wanted to meet at 11:30 the following morning in Dallas, less than 12 hours away. They flew through the night. Netflix was on track to lose at least $50 million that year. The meeting they were flying to was not a negotiation from strength. It was a request for rescue. Consultants mind. The proposal they brought to Dallas was straightforward. Blockbuster should acquire Netflix for $50 million. In return, Netflix would run Blockbuster's online operations. Blockbuster would promote Netflix in its stores. The two companies would together own both the physical and digital rental markets. The meeting lasted approximately 20 minutes. There was perfect silence, Mark Randolph recalled. "We'll consider it," they said, but we could tell they were fighting to suppress laughter. After that, the meeting went downhill fast. Blockbuster passed, Netflix flew home. 10 years later, Netflix was worth over $13 billion. Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy in 2010. The 20-minute meeting in Dallas in September 2000 is one of the most discussed moments in business history. It is also one of the most misunderstood, because the standard version of the story describes Blockbuster's decision as obviously wrong, visible as wrong at the time it was made, and attributable to the arrogance or short-sightedness of Blockbuster's leadership. None of those things are accurate, and the accurate version is considerably more instructive. The former Blockbuster CEO John Antioco later asserted that there were never any serious acquisition talks. Antioco confirmed that the Netflix team did visit Blockbuster to discuss a potential business arrangement and apparently offered to sell their company for $50 million, but noted he was not part of that meeting, though he did stop by to greet the visitors. This detail changes the story in a specific way. The meeting that is described as the moment Blockbuster laughed Netflix out of the room was not attended by Blockbuster's CEO. It was attended by mid-level Blockbuster executives who had neither the authority to approve an acquisition nor the context of Blockbuster's full strategic picture. In the end, it doesn't appear that anyone, including Netflix, felt their company was worth $50 million at that time, Antioco concluded. Netflix was losing money. It had approximately 300,000 subscribers. The DVD by mail model was unproven at scale. The streaming model, the thing that would eventually make Netflix worth hundreds of billions of dollars, did not exist in 2000 and would not exist as a commercially viable consumer product for another 7 years. The broadband penetration required to make streaming viable was not present. The Blockbuster executives in that room in Dallas were not evaluating Netflix the company as it would become. They were evaluating Netflix the company as it was, a money-losing DVD by mail service with 300,000 subscribers asking $50 million for itself. That evaluation, at that price for that company in that moment, was not obviously wrong. It was defensible. It turned out to be catastrophically wrong, but the wrongness was not visible in the available information at the time the decision was made. Have you ever witnessed or made a decision that was defensible given the available information? That turned out to be catastrophically wrong, and that is now described in retrospect as obviously a mistake. Leave a comment. The more instructive part of the Blockbuster Netflix story is not the 2000 meeting. It is what happened in 2004. 6 years later, Blockbuster proved it could crush Netflix anytime it wanted, and was on the path to doing exactly that before one of its investors seemingly did everything in his power to put the brakes on it, and more or less saved Netflix by accidentally torpedoing Blockbuster. In 2004, under CEO John Antioco, the same CEO who had not attended the 2000 meeting, Blockbuster launched Blockbuster Online, a direct competitor to Netflix's DVD by mail model. The service was well executed, no late fees, a comparable selection, and the unique advantage of allowing subscribers to exchange their mail-in DVDs for in-store rentals. In 2005, Blockbuster had 2 million online subscribers. Netflix had 4.2 million, but Blockbuster was closing the gap. The decision to eliminate late fees in 2005 led to a temporary increase in rental volume, but resulted in a significant loss of $600 million in annual revenue, which was critical for Blockbuster's financial health. Icahn, who had acquired nearly 10% of Blockbuster's shares, opposed Antiocho's digital strategy. He led a campaign to remove Antiocho and reverse the digital investment. Antiocho was replaced. The Blockbuster Online investment was scaled back. The strategy that had been closing the gap with Netflix was abandoned. Netflix's subscriber growth accelerated. By 2007, the year Netflix launched streaming, it had 7.5 million subscribers. Blockbuster's online service had stagnated. The gap that Antiocho's strategy had been closing reopened irreversibly. If the specific mechanism, not the 2000 meeting but the 2006 board decision that reversed a strategy that was working, is the most instructive part of this story, the like is the direct signal. The employees who worked at Blockbuster's 9,000 stores during this period experienced two different timelines simultaneously, without knowing they were in either of them. They were in the timeline of a company that was, in its daily operations, still enormously successful. Blockbuster stores in the mid-2000s were still generating significant foot traffic. The brand was still trusted. The employees who had built their careers there had every reason to believe the company would continue. They were also in the timeline of a company whose digital response to the competitive threat had been developed, deployed, and then systematically dismantled by a shareholder conflict that had nothing to do with the competitive logic of the strategy. Antiocho might have pulled Blockbuster's fat from the fire if his board and executive team had been willing to go along with his own innovative ideas, but they weren't. The 84,000 Blockbuster employees who lost their jobs between 2008 and 2010 were not failed by a leader who couldn't see the future. They were failed by a governance structure that allowed a single large shareholder to override a competitive strategy that was producing results, for reasons that served that shareholder's financial interests better than they served the company's competitive survival. This is the specific parallel to the Sears case examined in an earlier episode. The role of shareholder intervention in determining the competitive outcome, independent of the quality of the competitive strategy being executed. The 20-minute meeting in Dallas in September 2000 cost everything in the cultural narrative. The actual meeting that cost everything was a board meeting 6 years later, when Icahn's opposition ended the strategy that had been working. The 20-minute meeting is a better story. It has a clear villain, a clear victim, and a clear lesson. The board meeting doesn't work as a story in the same way. It requires understanding corporate governance, shareholder rights, board dynamics, and the specific financial interests that were served by the decision. And it doesn't produce the satisfying, "can you believe they laughed" moment that the Dallas meeting produces. But the 20-minute meeting is the story about a decision that was defensible given the available information. The board meeting is the story about a decision that was wrong given information that was available at the time. Blockbuster Online's subscriber growth was public. The competitive dynamic was visible. The logic of the digital investment was not contested by anyone with operational knowledge of the business. The most consequential decision in the Blockbuster Netflix story was not made in Dallas in September 2000 by mid-level executives who didn't have the authority to approve it anyway. It was made in Blockbuster's boardroom in 2005 and 2006 by people who had the authority, the information, and the competitive context to make the correct decision, and who made the wrong one for reasons that had nothing to do with the competitive logic. The practical thing. The decisions that have the most cultural presence in a failure narrative are rarely the decisions that had the most causal weight. The flashy, anecdote-friendly, villain-producing moment is almost never where the outcome was actually determined. Finding the decision that actually determined the outcome, quieter, more complex, less narratively satisfying, is the work that produces a usable lesson rather than a usable story. And the usable lesson from the Blockbuster story is not, don't laugh at scrappy startups. It is, the competitive strategy that would have saved Blockbuster existed, was deployed, was working, and was reversed by a governance decision that prioritized short-term shareholder interests over long-term competitive survival. The 20-minute meeting in Dallas had nothing to do with it. This content was developed with the support of artificial intelligence tools and underwent human review, editorial curation, and approval before publication. The analysis presented here is strictly educational and philosophical in nature, grounded in behavioral psychology and classical Stoicism.